Amateur Redneck Workshop. I'm Harold, and today we got a little project that I sort of, I guess, backed into, or it wasn't on the plan, you know, wasn't in the list of stuff I was going to do, and so it caught me a little off guard, and it's been ongoing for, I don't know, a couple of weeks now anyway, sort of on the sidelines, and at least I was lucky enough. I did do a little video of it before I got to this point, and I'll show you what it is. We got these dies here. Fellow I know is ended up working on old cars. I think he's doing some sheet metal work and such. And this is a die setup to poke holes in sheet metal. And what he wanted this great big bolt in there, because it came with came with this little bitty bolt, and of course it won't fit there. So starting off, and I'll show you how I did it. I machined the hole in this one, and I machined out a hole in that, and then threaded them. And to do that, I had to take my acetylene torch, and I had to anneal the center hole in these things to make them soft enough to cut. And that worked out all right, because it left, you know, the outside part and all this stuff, left all that still just as tough and hard as it was in the first place. But this little guy here, these cutting lips here, they're they're thin, and the rest of this little booger is super thick. So to get it hot enough, well, I started on my torch, and the red was creeping out into these fingers before it got all the way through. And I tried cutting it a little bit, and I couldn't get it soft enough to cut it. So I ordered some fire brick, and I'm going to try and make a little furnace or something to put the fire brick in there and blow some heat in there with a little propane torch, and see if I can get it hot enough to anneal it. And then once I've got it annealed, go ahead and drill the hole in there. It'd be a 3/4 inch hole. And then I'm going to have to treat it and get it hard again, which we may or may not succeed, you know, so this may or may not turn out to be a total loss. We don't know. But before we get into all that, sometimes I get questions from people about, was I in the military? Well, no, I wasn't in the military. The reason I got all those blankets that you see in the videos with military symbols is the boss lady likes to keep the thermostat about the same temperature as Pierre's backyard up there in Quebec, you know, and not in the summer. His backyard in January, or, you know, February, something like that. So I would sometimes complain about freezing to death, and so I'd quit whining. She went out and decided she was going to make me some blankets for when I was sitting around in various places. And I went with her, and she let me pick out the material, and I liked all those military emblems. So there you are. Excuse me, getting a frog in my throat. So that's why I got them all like that. I had 3 brothers in the military. There was actually 5 of us, and 3 of us was in. 2 of them were in the Navy. 1 was in the Army, and one of the boys that was in the Navy later joined up with the Air Force. So they covered quite a few of them there without my help. And I was almost in the military. I got my draft notice for Vietnam, and after trying to figure some way to get out of it, you know, and they told me, well, if you get, you know, if you're drafted, you're going into the Army or the Marines. And so I went down, and I did the recruit to the Air Force recruiter, and I got signed up pretty much. I didn't go for the final step yet. And I went down to the, you know, the draft board place, the big old building there. Got in the wrong room, you know, and these guys filling out papers that looked maybe, you know, kind of different from what I'd expected. And the guy says, "Are you sure you're in the right room?" I said, "Well, I don't know, I just got my draft notice." And he said, "No," he says, "you're in the wrong room." He says, "These guys are going to be in Saigon next month." And I thought, no, I don't want to be there. So I bounced across the hall. They were already started, you know, had to catch up about 10 questions worth while they were there. And so there was this guy walking around with the form around the room explaining to people exactly what each one of the blanks meant, you know, so that you could answer it right. Excuse me. And you know, there was a lot of guys that didn't really want to go, and so they would own up to practically anything if they thought it'd get them out of it. And anyway, after we got all the forms filled out, they sent us down the hall, you know, and the guy took my glasses and measured them on his machine. He says, "You're disqualified." I said, "Yeah, I am." "Yeah, your glasses are too strong." He said, "You're disqualified." I said, "Well, can I go home?" "No," he said, "You can't go home. Get in line." So I had to go through the whole thing, you know, the physical and everything. And they come down to this one spot where the guy was going to draw blood, and he stuck this thing in your arm, the little bulb, this, you know, it's sucking blood down into this little tube. Excuse me. And so you'd walk along in line behind the other guys, and the guy at the other end of the line would unplug it and put your name on it and stick it in a box or whatever. And so we'd go out in the hall from that, and everybody was looking pretty good to me. I didn't see anything unusual, but this guy comes walking by, you know, with a military clothes on there, and he says, "If you feel faint, you sit down on there and lean back against the wall." And just as soon as he said that, about 3 of those guys just fell out on the floor. Now, I think they wouldn't have done that. I think they'd have made it just fine if he hadn't said that. And I've long suspected he did that just for the fun of it, just to see them, you know, all of a sudden get faint and pass out on the floor. But anyway, enough of this stuff. Let's get on with the heating and cutting and all that other stuff. We will interrupt our normally scheduled programming to take on a little side project here before we finish the one we're working on. Sometimes people bring me things that I really can do, and I think maybe I can do this one. I've got to fit this bolt into that hole and thread it. What we've got here is one of those sheet metal hole punchers. Here's the little die that does the cutting, and it goes right down into there. And you pull it down into there with that bolt, you know. Except this particular bolt is a bit bigger than the hole. So if this stuff isn't too hard to cut, I will rework it. And if it is too hard to cut, I may have to figure out how to anneal it and then heat treat it again. But I won't do that without consulting the owner, because he may not like that idea. Right at first I thought it might have a little out around condition, but after zeroing the thing in, it looks to me like that's within a half thousandth, except for that one little spot where it jumps. So there's a little lump on the side of it there. Now I think that's a pretty good job of chucking it up. So now we'll see what we can do about boring that hole out to the size for a 3/4 of a 16 thread. We'll see. If I can bore this thing out a 1/4 inch it's going to take to put that 3/4 thread in it without having to, you know, anneal it and then retemper it, it'll be a whole lot better for everybody involved. So I'm going to work on it and see what happens. I've cut most of the threads out, but I haven't got it all out of there yet. So hopefully at some point I'll see a little bit of success here, or maybe I'll get through the surface hardness and find it's nice and soft in the middle. Who knows? It could be just like a jelly donut. Cutting something off. Alright, I nailed the hole in the middle of this thing because I really couldn't cut it with the carbide tool bit, and we're ready to thread it. A little bit of good tap goody, can't hurt anything. Whoa, spilled it all over. And I guess that that guy won't fit, but this one will. So this will be the one we use. But I'm not liking that. So I think I'm going to single point the thing. There you go. Yeah. I don't want the thing to eat up my tap. Well, I managed to get this one annealed good enough in the center that I could come back and cut it, and it still just lets the file just skate over it. It's not eating into the surface, so I figure that it's only soft right there. Now I had to anneal this one twice because I wound up, I don't know if you can see it or not, that little lip right there on the inside. You get a light here. You can see that little lip on the inside of it there. That was still hard surface from you know, the first hardening of it. So I annealed that little piece all over again. We're going to try it. And I started boring on this, but I didn't get very far, and I ran into hard stuff all over again after annealing. So I had to go and heat it again. Hopefully it's still pretty hard out here, and it does seem to be hard. So I guess it's going to come out all right, depending of course on whether this is soft enough to go ahead and bore a hole to let that bolt go through. So we'll be back in a second. Okay, so I got two propane torches here, and I got it stuck inside of a little container I've made from some half a dozen fire bricks. I knew I should have had like 8 or 10 of them, but somehow the order didn't come out like that. They sold them 6 at a time, and I think there were other places that sold them, you know, like 1 at a time or 6 at a time. But believe it or not, they're just like iced tea in Massachusetts. They're seasonal, and they don't want to sell them in the summertime. I went to Tractor Supply, and this is one of their normal things to sell, except they didn't have any. And I asked the guy why. He said, well, it's seasonal. So I had to get it at Home Depot. I guess nothing seasonal there. And hopefully once it heats up in there, you'll be able to see. But what I've got is I've got 6 fire bricks stacked up there and 2 propane cylinders. And I didn't go buy an extra propane cylinder for this. It's just I got 2 of them because I made a mistake. You know, I went looking in the garage for one and decided I didn't have one anymore and bought one, and then later I found the other one. So maybe this will have the power to heat the thing up, and maybe it won't. We'll find out. I'm not any expert at this for sure. I think the temperature is increasing some, but I still don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know if I can see it. I'm out here in the sun trying to see this thing. I don't know. It's got a little red tint, but it's got a long ways to go yet. Quite possibly you guys can see more than I think you can, because if I stand back at the right angle, I can, where is it now? Where's it at? If I stand back at the right angle, I can see it starting to get kind of cherry red in there. So possibly you can too. I bet another half iron, it'll be soaked all the way through. This is my second year at it, and this is the best I've done for a garden so far. But got okra here and okra there, and then beans over there, and radishes down on the end, and a bunch of tomatoes. And it's I'm sure not very impressive to those that are actual gardeners, but this is my second try, and this time I did the hills there so that the roots wouldn't wouldn't rot out, you know. Last year it rained so much that everything just rotted and died. So we'll see what happens. We got more light this year, even though I wasn't able to accidentally cut any more off the neighbor's tree. Alright, it's been 4 days since I turned off the burner here. I had other things to do, been in Dallas and one thing and another. And when I turned it off, I stuffed this rock wool in the end of it, and I covered the top over with some rock wool. And of course it sat there cooling off, hopefully slow enough to anneal this thing. And now that we're back to it, we're going to put it in the lathe and see if I can cut a hole in it like I was supposed to. I scratched it with a file, and the file made me think that it softened it up some, so we're going to try and run this tool up in there. And I've got it sticking out too far, I realize that. But we're going to try it that way anyway and see what happens. If it starts cutting good, well, maybe I'll move it back in there to make it shorter. Although it probably won't really get shorter. And I think it's cutting, so we may be on the verge of success here. What I need to do is get a more rigid boring bar for there. I'll do that. Let's see if a little bit more rigid bar will help too. Well, I moved that tool further back in the hole, which didn't give it any more support because whatever's hanging out around 3/4 inch part of it is going to flop and breathe. But I'm going to feed it from the inside out for a few more times here. I think I'm starting to make some progress, even though it's slow and squeaky and lots of chatter. It's cutting kind of ragged, but it's cutting. It's really raising the roughness, but slowly it's cutting its way into a bigger and bigger hole. Alright, we did it. It fits in the hole, and so that's all I was supposed to do, is make it fit the hole, and I did it. So I'll check it with a file and see if I think it needs to be rehardened. I think mainly the part I nailed was the center hole, because the file seems like it kind of skates on the outside, but I'm going to look it over and then I'll make a decision on that. I'm having all manner of problems getting these turkeys burned today, but when I turned the fire off and stuffed the steel wool in the hole there, the boss lady had a little errand for me to run over to Pasadena. So we took off and we did a little something I wanted to, and it got, time to eat, and she wanted to stop at the hamburger place there. So we pulled into our favorite brand, and she went and sat down at the table, and I was to go up there and order the burger. So I ordered 2 meals all the way for here, and then I could feel my windpipe started to get all plugged up, so I kind of get a little throat clearing, and that hacked up a big old oyster that stuck to the top of my mouth and was just sort of slowly dripping down. And about that time, the lady behind the counter says, "You want cheese on that?" And I go to say no, and that oyster almost pops out between my lips. I mean, you know, I was sort of on the edge of losing control there, and the lady behind the counter says, "Almost lost that, and didn't we?" And to say I was embarrassed is this, you know, kind of an understatement. So I decided I can't ever go back to Pasadena. You know, I mean, I'll be going down the street and little kids will point at me and say, "Hey, there's the oyster man," you know. It's a hard life being a redneck. You might can see it's starting to get a little orange glow to it. When I've done as good as I think I can with these, I'll take my acetylene torch and blow up in there for a few minutes, and then we'll dip the thing in the oil. Alright, so that's heat treated and tempered and ready to go back to its owner. And I didn't show you skating the file over it, but the file did indeed skate over the surface, and so it's hard. I don't know if it's as hard as it was when I got it, but it's hard. So we'll skip on now to see if we're going to hear from Bubba or something. I kind of think we'll go by the San Jacinto Monument though, on the back roads of Texas kind of thing. Well, it seems like Bubba and Cooter was out of a job, and they got to read in the paper, and there was an ad for a team truck driver job. And so they thought, well, that'd be just right. They could both drive the truck, you know, and they'd work together, you know, because they're buddies and they like doing stuff together. So they go down and apply for it. And personnel manager interviews Bubba, you know, asks him all kind of truck driver kind of questions. And Bubba just barely passes. So he brings in Cooter, and he asks him all kind of truck driving questions. And Cooter just barely passes, you know. And so then he decides to ask him a question together. After all, they're going to be a driving team, you know. So personnel manager says, well, he says, Cooter's asleep in the back of the truck there, and you're hauling 60,000 pounds of steel pipe, and you're going down a hill, and your brakes go out. He says, what are you going to do? Bubba thinks on it, and he thinks on it. He thinks more, and he thinks a long time about it. He says, I know what I'd do. And the personnel manager says, well, what's that? And he says, I'd wake up Cooter. And the personnel manager says, well, what reason would you have for waking up Cooter? And Bubba says, well, on the count of he ain't never seen no big rig wreck before. Well, that's all, folks. Y'all try to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Leave a comment if you got something to say. And above all, remember, keep on keeping on. Bye now.
Ship channel and a busy park with people. But on the afternoon of April 21st, 1836, Hotwheels Artillery Corps, Burleson's 1st Regiment, and Sherman's 2nd Regiment with its nut company of Mexican vessels on the Captain Juan 17.